I don't think... I don't think this one has any smut in it.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think it's just, like, a little bit nasty.
He's just giving a blowjob to his hand. It looks
yeah,
like...
that's not M. That's, like...
That's just weird. What the What?
Can we stop calling him the Englishman? He has a name.
Why is he giving a blowjob to his fingers? What?
I don't know.
The digit gave a wet pop as it slid
Ew.
free of the now damp lips. Nice. One time my cousin put my finger in her mouth.
Why?
I had chocolate on I'd been eating an ice cream cone, and I was
That's
I was
weird.
being goofy and being like, ew, it's on my hands, and she put my finger in her mouth.
She sexually assaulted your fingers.
And I went,
How old were you?
like 14. His tongue explored each callus.
Ew.
What that mean, boy? Whoa, what?
I, like, physically recoiled when I read this.
Well, you better show me.
My hands, like, flew away from my laptop.
How bad is it?
It's, on a scale of 1 to 10,
Uh-huh.
knowing that Alexander's, like, 300 years old,
Mm-hmm.
it's a 12.
I don't believe you. Show me. Show me the offending. What did you black out?
Irrelevant.
Second was slower, deeper. By the third, Daniel find his nose pressed against the curly white hairs. That's bad.
I told you.
You're weak. You are weak.
I
You are a
told you
weak
it was
child.
bad. I don't... ugh.
It's not the worst thing ever read.
It's not the worst thing I've ever read, but it's not good. Oh my god, involves a flog and a watching prisoner.
Nani?
Nani? God, there's so many OCs.
Tortured romance. Why is the cover a potato? Grunt / OC prisoner? Grunt?
Mm-hmm.
Wade Tibbs?
Wade Tibbs.
What's happening in this fic? There's some weird sadomasochism in this one.
Where?
I don't know. I'm in amnesia hell. Harry Potter roleplay. And my new addiction to a Harry Potter roleplay site.
God, 68,000 words. This one's almost 100K.
They're calling him Danny in this one.
Danny? Oh.
Danny! Prison is fun. What in the god? What in the... Is this Dan X the floor flesh? It sure is. Why is the grass sentient in this one? What?
You know.
Let me just read you the phrase. Daniel greedily rode his fingers.
Nice.
In Dutch, Daniel, he doesn't speak English. I don't speak Dutch.
What does it say?
Ich bin ein Schlampe.
How do you spell schlump?
SCHLAMPE.
That says I am your slut.
Nice.
Yes. Okay, which one do you want to read? I'll let you pick. So if it's bad, it's your fault.
Alternate universe in which Daniel is extremely religious, only to fall into the arms of the original sinner.
That's very dramatic.
That sounds sexual urges had tainted the poor Baron.
Dear, that sounds good.
Nice.
Nice.
One part of his brain was telling him he was going to hell. I'm Jewish, so I only know so much.
Oh my god.
This is a recipe for disaster.
Oh. Okay, sure.
That always
You wanna
feels
start?
fair. You want me to
Wanna
start?
This,
Okay.
This one's pretty short, and there's nothing bad in it, so.
Alright. Welcome to the Amnesia Fit compilation for some reason.
I feel like I was always aware, kind of, not on a conscious level, but just on an intellectual one, that Amnesia fanfiction existed, but it was never brought to the forefront of my mind until just now.
I had absolutely no idea that
I knew.
were into the, like, I couldn't even name more than one character because he says it at the very beginning of the game.
I've known about Daniel and Alexander and their
BDSM relationship.
Yeah, I've known about that for years.
I had no idea. This was a shock.
Yeah, I figured this existed, but I never sought it out for obvious reasons. I never
and then I came along.
Never had a reason to until now. So
I could not tell you the lore of Amnesia. I no idea
the lore of Amnesia. I know a little bit.
Why is there floor flesh? I don't know.
I don't know.
Why not?
Why not? It's spooky, I guess.
Hey.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about the story. I know
I'll come out there with the mop.
You done?
That's right. No. Oh. It's shaking my windows.
Are you done?
Do you hear it?
No, I don't. I hear Nene. Do you want to go out there and fuck somebody up?
It's rattling things. Are they done? I have a bunch of loose bricks in my backyard and I'm not afraid to throw them.
We're trying to record.
I know, Nene.
You're gonna have to cut this out.
We're done. Alright, this is The Fear of Gods the Holy.
By, they don't have an avatar even to make fun of.
Wow. By this sinner.
This lovely soul.
It's a AU in which Daniel's a religious boy.
Yeah.
But he loves the original sinner. Wah, wah, wah.
Bwah, bwah.
Just a short opening thing to set the mood, I guess. Also, excuse me, Mississippi.
Really?
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
I would talk with you again.
Why can I never speak properly? Excuse any misinterpretations of Christianity now and in the future. I'm Jewish, so I only know so much. Wink.
Winky face.
Rights are not mine. I'm only borrowing these characters and ruining them. The story is mine, though, so.
Yeah. Okay.
Algeria had been the start of everything. The start,
I guess.
And the, you know. On the first day, God created Algeria. The Alpha and the Omega, which I can't read without thinking of that Bad Wolf movie.
We never finished that series.
I'm frightened of it.
It's good.
He hadn't wanted to liken... What? Liken such a horror as the shadow to that of his graceful God. But in times of desperation, he couldn't help it. It felt, truly, as if God himself was punishing him for trespassing upon the sacred ground, the soles of his shoes, dirtying the sanctity of that place. His thieving intentions only cementing the fate he'd cast upon himself and everyone he'd contacted since. He'd had.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
English is a horrible language.
No idea that his entrance into that tomb,
his entrance.
Help. The resting place, perhaps, of Tin Hinan. Who?
Whatever.
Okay. Would have put him at odds with heaven. Surely he'd never have gone to that damn desert if he'd known. Surely Herbert. Who? Who's Herbert? Would never have asked him there if he'd known. The world would have gone on, just as it had before, unaware of the awful power of a wrathful god. Daniel wondered if the shadow brought the end times for the whole world, or just for him. He didn't want to find out, and so had run, like a coward, to a man who had promised protection. Baron Alexander von Brennenberg.
Misspelled Brennenberg. Good job.
Brennenberg. A great...
It's a very, very German.
Lord. Yeah. Who ruled over a bit of land in Prussia. Nini, this isn't about you. Prussia. Daniel couldn't remember traveling so fast in his life, despite the distance of England and Prussia. I don't know where Prussia is.
I have no fucking clue where Prussia is. The only thing I know about Prussia is Hitalia, and I try to forget.
It's gone now. Both Prussia and Hitalia.
It's gone.
He felt, Prussia doesn't exist.
The evil is defeated.
We've banished it to another realm.
Ugh.
He'd felt he'd made it in record time. He could feel the oppression of the shadow if he lingered in place for more than a night and hardly slept on the journey. But at last, he'd arrived at Castle Brennenberg, so relieved to have it in sight that he completely ignored the fearful and distrustful glances of the villagers. He'd ridden a carriage up to the castle proper and was met at the doors by the Baron himself. He stood there, arms open and welcoming, like Christ to the hungry and homeless. "Come unto me," he seemed to say with his smile, "and leave your weary troubles at my door." Safe.
Okay.
Your turn.
Chapter Adults. Characters still aren't mine. They rejected my request.
Yeah.
Daniel had been surprised at the lack of servants in such a large estate. Not to say that they weren't there, but there seemed to be few enough that he never caught sight of them. When he'd asked Alexander, the man had waved it off with a simple excuse. What's my voice? "People around here are very distrustful of strangers, my servants being no exception."
Real good for the Baron.
Real good for the Baron. Alright. It seemed reasonable enough to Daniel. He hadn't asked again. But the castle itself, so grand and hauntingly beautiful, had him enraptured as soon as he'd set foot inside. Everything from the paintings on the walls to the rugs on the stone floor had him admiring the place. Large windows, sometimes stained glass, reminded him of the most extravagant cathedrals, and the air of otherworldliness that lived in this place only furthered his relation of it to that of a house of God. He felt as if he should whisper within its walls and speak only of good things. However, that contradiction, why can't I say that word?
That contradicted the purpose.
That contradicted the purpose of him being here at all. God, I know what it's like now.
Now you know my troubles. I've given you the disease.
Yeah.
So you've said you can help me?
That's your deep south voice, come on.
Well, I'm gonna have to try. If I pitch it up, I'm gonna have to try really hard not to turn it into the saloon girl voice.
I can't handle the saloon girl voice.
What is wrong with it for you? What crosses the line?
I don't know. I feel like I'm too gay for the saloon girl voice.
Oh, hang on.
Makes me uncomfortable.
Let me slip back into this. Hang on.
There you go.
Hang on.
So you've...
The fuck was that?
Oh, that's really high pitched. What if you sounded like this? That's stepping dangerously into Toad territory.
You sound like Zeke.
Who's Zeke?
From Pokeballers.
Oh. Yeah,
He has the Toad voice, yeah. I mean, you could make him Toad, but I feel like Deep South fits better.
Yeah, hang on, maybe a more...
You should be able to do this.
I can do it, but it would just be in my normal... If I pitch it up, we're getting into saloon girl territory.
Okay, just be normal. You don't have to pitch it up.
Maybe... I feel like I'm not as good.
So you've said you can help me? You can protect me from the shadow?
He asked as they sat down in a large dining hall, the Baron on one end of the table and himself on the other. It was awkward. They had to shout to hear each other.
They couldn't see each other over a candle?
God, whenever I try to do this voice, it wants to come out like mucus. Yeah, I've stated in the letter I sent. I know what you're dealing with. Alexander's deep voice was soothing and held power and knowledge that Daniel doubted he'd ever possess.
How?
He asked again and was met with a shake of the Baron's white head.
Nani?
Not now. We should discuss it later, but for now, I think you should rest a spell after your journey. He smiled again, and those amber eyes had Daniel pinned to his chair for a moment.
Oh.
This guy was ancient.
Jesus Christ, those wrinkles. It's like that scene from Emperor's New Groove.
Yeah! The brunette, who has a name, just nodded and looked at the hearty plate of food in front of him. His mouth watered as he had barely eaten during his trip, deciding to save his money for the fastest travel.
Nani?
He glanced up at Alexander, who was still watching him, and gave a nervous quirk of his lips before returning his gaze to his food.
Alright, tell me if it's the saloon girl voice or if this is safe.
Okay, if you start making the saloon girl voice, I will scream.
I'm trying not to. I'm gonna try to stay away from, like, the inflection that makes it the saloon girl voice.
It's very
sensual.
Like this very...
Dear Lord, thank you for this food. Bless the hands that prepared it. Bless it to our use and to your service. And make us ever mindful of the needs of others. Through Christ our Lord we pray. Amen.
And Alexander was like, what the fuck?
What the fuck is this little church girl?
He muttered under his breath and began to eat. Later, after dinner had been finished, Alexander showed him to her.
Cross.
Yeah. Okay. And Alexander had shown him to where he would be staying. Daniel wondered if it was all going to be in vain. Would Alexander be able to protect him? Would the kind Baron fall victim to the shadow just like all the others he'd gone to? That night, he went to bed with a swirling mind and thoughts of sin.
Teacher, I have a question.
Yes?
What's the shadow?
The shadow is the evil thing that's making the ground flesh.
Oh.
Yes. He awakened it in some temple.
Oh, so that's like Daniel's
I think it was
ghost, and that wasn't anything to do with the castle and original. Okay.
No, it was awakened. I think it's attached to like the orb or something. That's why they have to put the orb back together. I don't know.
Oh.
I don't remember. We haven't been reading the lore, so I don't know.
We just skip every single note.
Just skip every single note. Yeah, just blow through it. All right, go ahead.
3. Walking to the sound of his own screaming, waking to the...
Just walking down the street. Making my way downtown. Walking fast. Fast. I'm homebound.
Waking to the sound of his own screaming wasn't something new. He'd had nightmares for a few weeks already. It was the cool, I thought I was going to say it was the cool hip thing to do. It was the cool, calming voice of
I thought it was like complete sentence. It was cool.
It was cool. Next to him on the bed that threw him off, he stared, blinking sleep from his eyes and looking at the man. He was dressed in a nightshirt. I'm getting Link flashbacks, and a candle sat on the bedside table, brought in
he
by
had no pants on.
No pants.
I could see his testicles down by his knees.
I was scared. The lines of worry on his features were pronounced in the darkness, and Daniel felt guilty for having awoken his host at what must be a very late hour.
Just nightmares.
That's Saloon Girl, I'm sorry.
Just nightmares,
he explained shakily, pulling his own sleeping gown around himself a little more, the thin material having become bunched and twisted due to his tormented sleep. Alexander watched him silently for a moment, those amber eyes making Daniel squirm with something he didn't want to think about. Before standing, there's a lot of run-on sentences.
I know.
Collecting his candle as he got to his feet.
Come, Daniel, there's something I want to tell you.
I can't handle it. And he left the room. Daniel stared at him before hurriedly getting out from beneath the lush sheets of his bed.
Lush,
bare
moist.
feet patting lightly on the cold floor as he followed the old man into his study. He'd been shown around a little, but hadn't paid much attention to the specific details of the rooms. There simply being too many of them for that.
This is a dildo.
This is a dildo, Daniel.
Danny boy.
You know what you do with this?
I'm never gonna call him Daniel, by the way. He's gonna be Danny Boy.
Please do.
Danny Boy.
Good God.
Good God.
Entering the room, though, he had to stop for a moment and glance around. The sheer diversity of the books that lined the walls was almost overwhelming, like in the library at a university. It appeared that Alexander had at least one book on every subject he wished.
Sit, Danny Boy.
Alexander?
Alexander?
You gave me the stupid.
Oh, I gave you the stupid.
Yes.
Okay.
Alexander commanded gently. And Dan did as he was told, finding a nice chair in front of a small fireplace. It was lit.
It was lit.
Finger circle emoji.
It was lit.
Daniel was warmed by the flames. The Baron sat next to him, his chair angled to point towards the other. Why can't I read tonight? My screen is like pulsating like the stupid game has warped me. Daniel, stop with the bass! I'm trying to record!
You're making the dog bark.
Stop! What is your deal? Quit smoking weed out in the parking lot.
Jesus Christ.
Dan watched
illegal
him.
Substances in my good Christian...
Cops. Not because you're smoking weed, but because you're being obnoxious. Dan watched him and took in his features in the low light of the fire. Stop it! Sorry. This stood out the most, as such an unusual color would. But looking closer, Alexander wasn't nearly as old as Daniel had. Stop! Thought first. Or at least not as old as
It sounds like you're having outbursts at the author. Like, stop!
At first glance.
Stop being like 100.
I've got so many loose bricks, man. Drive away with your weed. Go somewhere else. Go. There is an empty Kolachi parking lot, like down the street. Stop it! Hoodlums.
What'd you do?
Oh, I climb on top of my fence and you just go, hey! Get out! And they're usually so shocked of seeing a head pop up over the fence that they're like, oh. So they drove away.
They drove away. Cool. All right.
So, where was I?
Alexander wasn't nearly as old as Daniel had first thought.
Oh, or at least not as old as his face told him to be at first glance. The man was aged, obviously, but also held youthfulness in his features. Power. He wondered how old the Baron was, and if he'd proved stronger than he seemed. Why would he think that? That's weird. The subtleness of Alexander's face, the way it tricked you into thinking him weak and withered, was almost enchanting. There was just one big sentence. Why was there a comma there? Daniel wondered if the man's body would be marked by age as well. Or if somehow he had some sort of miracle friggin' cream he was putting on his back. If he'd be broader than he appeared.
Just make him swole as fuck.
It was just ripped, man. Would his skin be smooth?
Ooh.
Too far?
I don't like that.
I'm sorry.
Smooth? Smooth.
Smooth, Dan.
Smooth, Danny boy.
Good God, okay.
Too much?
Too far.
Danny boy.
Danny boy.
Danny boy, spread your cheeks, Danny boy.
Hello, officer, I need you again.
Okay, alright. You're staring, Danny boy.
Alexander's voice brought him out of himself, and he blushed fiercely as he realized where his thoughts had gone.
Oh no, the homosexuals.
God is gonna punish me. He looked away, rubbing at his eyes and cursing himself. He didn't see the amused shine in Alexander's eyes or the small smirk on his lips. What was Danny's voice?
Southern.
Hang on, Lemmy. No, not now. This isn't the time for the... Not now. Where'd my
the homosexuals.
Not for the gays. Not now. Not again. It was a part of himself that Dan denied. Why are we calling him Dan and Danny Boy? What? How did this happen?
I have no idea. I don't know why you're calling him Dan.
I like repeating syllables, if you haven't noticed. Nini, BB, Dan. His sins were more than divine trespass.
I wanted to say cummies, but it didn't work.
God stopped you. And he wished he could rid himself of his gayness. It wasn't right. He knew it wasn't, but every time he thought he had gotten it under control, it would rear its head in the worst way.
Danny boy, I think I should explain.
The Baron stated, and the young man looked at him hesitantly. The older man took a slight breath and began to tell him of the orb, the shadow, and the reason for the deaths. Danny listened, knowing with each word that his decision to come to Brennenburg had been the right one. No one else could even hope to know so much, surely, and they certainly wouldn't want to help him. Daniel had found a saver. Saver?
A saver? Are you sure?
Savior in the Baron. I have strokes on a daily basis, okay?
You might, medically.
Yeah.
Okay, chapter 3. They still haven't obtained the rights
chapter
to the
4.
characters, I assume. What? This is chapter... Okay, this is chapter 4. Cool.
Nice.
Chapter 4. Oh, I'm sorry.
Chapter 4.
Your fucking thing is blocking the... Your little Skype thingy-majig is blocking...
Scoot it.
Scoodle it.
Scoot
Alright,
Makora
chapter 4. The next morning, Daniel awoke flustered. His dream had not been of the nightmarish variety, but it still shook him.
He was shook.
Shooketh. He just remembered skin, heat, and that deep, confident voice speaking all manner of filth to him.
Oh.
Deep and confident.
Meokus.
Would you... Meokus.
Whispered in his ear.
Meokus.
Oh my god.
Do you like that?
No.
You like that?
Mucus whispers.
Mucus whispers. A shiver ran through the young man, but he shook his head. Blast it! He'd been so preoccupied with running for his life that the thought of such blasphemous feelings surfacing here hadn't crossed his mind. But now, in the safety of the Baron's home, he had a boner.
You're not wrong.
Daniel wondered what the Baron might do if he found out about Daniel's strangeness. In the least, he'd be kicked out. Worst case was that the Baron took the law into his own hands, as was his right to do, and execute Daniel.
Wow, remember when it was illegal to be gay?
It still is in some parts of the world.
That's true.
He wouldn't do that. He seems so nice.
Shaking his head again, Daniel rose from the bed, dressed himself, and went out into the castle to seek the Baron. Cross!
Jesus!
Truly, it was an enormous place. He'd been wandering around for what felt like an hour and hadn't seen hide nor hair of anyone else. The man had to be somewhere, though, and so Daniel kept looking, staying in the brightest areas...
What about the brightest areas?
What about him? Of the castle for as long as he could. It was only when he managed to get himself well and truly lost that he found the Baron, or rather, the Baron found him. Danny boy? He jolted slightly, turning from the window he'd been staring out of and looking to find Alexander, standing in the hall and looking at him curiously.
Good morning, Baron.
He stood up a little straighter. The man raised a brow and walked up to him. What are you doing, Danny boy? The older man asked, causing Daniel to flush. Hearing the man say his...
I'm sorry, I'm 3 years old.
I thought it too.
Oh dear. Hive mind.
Hearing the man say his name wasn't going to do any good in terms of keeping his sin to himself.
I was trying to find you and I got lost.
He admitted, and Alexander chuckled, weaving an arm around the young man's shoulders. I was in my laboratory making meth. Come,
I'll show you how.
Show it to ya. We'll be millionaires, Danny boy.
Oh, God.
He said easily, and Daniel was too distracted by the man's arm around him to wonder what he had a laboratory for. As they walked, Alexander kept speaking to him in words, leaning in close and smiling gently. Daniel felt his cheeks flush and could only stammer out small responses. He hoped Alexander would attribute it to him being so nervous due to the shadow. He didn't know Alexander was doing in on purpose. Jesus!
Jesus! All men praise the Lord! Hallelujah!
Now be careful, Danny boy. Some of the ingredients down here are very delicate, Alexander advised, letting go of the man and walking over to some burners. A peculiar-looking mixture sat on one of them, casting a dim, purplish glow around that corner of the room.
What's all this for?
Daniel asked as he looked at the many shelves of bottles and vials. There seemed to be things in here that he'd never heard of. Orpiment? What was that? I have no idea.
Me neither.
Mainly it's a hobby of mine. I mix tonics and various other things, he explained vaguely, and Daniel blinked in interest.
What kind of tonics?
Oh, you know, lube.
Oh.
He wondered, and Alexander chuckled at the childlike curiosity. Can we not use the words childlike?
I will throw a brick. Did you just drive around the block? You think you japed me? I'll kill him.
Are they back?
I think they stopped. They know better. Carry on.
Glancing at the man, he wondered how simple it would be to wrap him around his finger. Taking another look at his large, open green eyes and rosy cheeks.
Okay, look, I just want you to know that I glanced at it and then lost my spot, and I thought it said taking another look at his large, open cheeks.
God, that's horrific. Alexander reasoned it wouldn't take very long at all.
Chapter 5? With the shadow creeping ever closer, Daniel's nightmares had begun to worsen. There would be days on end that he would not sleep, and it was becoming an obvious problem. Right now, he was in the laboratory once again, listening to Alexei. Can I call him Alexei?
No.
Okay. Alexander explained the recipe for something. He wasn't sure as he dozed off multiple times.
And with that, adjust the heat under the mixture. Did Danny boy, you listening?
The young man jerked upright from where he'd been sagging against a barrel. Well, yes! Yes!
Yes!
Eyes wide. Alexander looked at him, frowning, before heaving a sigh and turning off the burner.
You haven't been sleeping well, I understand.
That voice.
Well, that's easy for me. That's like how I talk sometimes.
Cracks me up. No one speaks like that here. He walked over, placing a hand on the Englishman's shoulder. But I'm sorry. I was encroaching.
Me. Encroaching on my territory. But what is at stake now? It is too important.
Danny nodded, looking up at Alexander imploringly. I know, Alex. I really do. I try to sleep, but I can't get the images out of my mind.
You nutsack.
I can't stop thinking about your pee-pee. The shadow, I mean. It shows me horrors and devilish scenes that disturb me.
And arouse me
I was
greatly.
Gonna say that.
I could hear the pause. I was like, oh boy.
Read my mind. He watched as something flash through Alexander's eyes and he smiled again.
Don't worry, Danny boy.
He threaded his fingers through the young man's hair, causing the brunette to flush and shift his feet.
I'll come up with something to help you sleep tonight.
It's my dick. He leaned in, giving a kind smile and whispering in Daniel's ear.
Promise.
Danny was flushing from head to toe as he left the laboratory. Sorry, I like...
Dee,
get out of my laboratory! Rather quickly and made his way to the room. Curse him! What was so wrong with him? And he took the kind Baron's offer for help as a sexual invitation.
You were not nearly close enough to your mic. Go ahead.
Sexual invitation. My face was on my mic.
Sexual invitation.
Sexual invitation.
Oh God, no. Too much.
Oh, I love that makes you so uncomfortable. It's hilarious.
This squicks me right out.
The man treated him as a son. That's not what you do with
your
son.
That's...
Brought him into his home. Out of the goodness and kindness of his soul, and Danny reacted as if the man had offered to sodomize him.
Had he not?
He pushed the door open and shut it tightly, panic in his chest. He went into his bag, rummaging through it and pulling out a small golden crucifix which he held tightly to his heart. Kneeling before the window, he closed his eyes and shakily recited his most spoken prayer. I confess my sexual sins and ask you to please pray the gay away. I renounce them and I'm truly sorry for participation. I repent and ask for forgiveness. I ask you to cleanse and heal me, deliver me. Jesus became a curse for me in the cross and blotted out the handwriting of ordinances against me. Please, I don't want to be gay, Jesus. I didn't ask for this. Letting out a nervous breath.
Please stop.
Please,
make
Jesus.
it stop. I'm attracted to this old wrinkly raisin guy.
Please, I can't stop picturing his nuts and they're gross, Jesus.
They're like around his ankle.
I've seen him peeking out his pants leg, please. Help.
Please. I can't.
Letting out a nervous breath, Daniel opened his eyes and kissed the golden crucifix, his hands sweating slightly. Please forgive me, he whispered.
Why do you get the short ones and I get the long ones?
Jesus is on my side tonight, remember?
I was the one that said cummies first, I think.
It's true. See, you sinned first.
When night came, Daniel felt as if he could finally resist whatever unholy thoughts his mind might conjure for him in Alexander's intentions. The man was nothing but helpful, devoted, pure. He didn't deserve for Daniel's filthy desires to be directed at him. It wasn't fair, and Daniel wasn't going to subject his savior to those demons.
Those gay demons.
Those gay demons. A soft knock on his door, and Daniel looked up from his book. It opened, revealing... I was going to make a Brokeback Mountain joke.
Oh, you resisted.
It opened, revealing Alexander at its threshold. Good evening, Danny boy, he said politely, staying outside the room until Daniel invited him in. He smiled and came to stand beside the young man, something in his hands. It was a dildo.
What you got, Alexander?
Ball of lube.
What's
brunette asked.
Vlog.
And the older man brought his hand up to show that he was gingerly holding a rose.
Gay.
Daniel blinked, confused, and looked to the Baron for clarification. It's for you, Danny boy, he smiled, and the brunette felt a pang in his heart. Fear, loathing, and guilt. There was no way Alexander meant it the way he was taking it. It was his own sick mind polluting the good man's gay intentions.
For me? Why?
He asked nervously, and the Baron chuckled. I find that... you got me doing the song. I find that sometimes nothing gives me peace of mind quite like a rose.
That was a little bit British at the start.
I'm sorry.
I forgive you.
He held it out, and Daniel took it, careful of the thorns. It's hard to, speak proper.
I know, and go into it.
Miocus. I thought to share such peace with you. That's the Miocus is like my Arthur song.
I know.
And he pet his head again, gently and with care.
Thank you, Alexander.
He expressed gratefully, and on the outside he was grateful. Inside, however, he was fearful of himself. His heart was in his throat and his limbs started to shake. This wasn't lost on Alexander. You don't seem peaceful, he said, and traced a thumb down Daniel's cheek. The younger man shivered and wrenched himself away.
Please, Alexander, I can't. I just can't.
Just can't be engaged with you, Alexander.
Please, you're getting too gay too close to me.
You're gay all over me. He muttered, clenching his hands and looking away. Can't what? The Baron moved towards him and enveloped him in his arms. Such care, such love, all for someone who didn't deserve it. Daniel shook his head, burying his face in the other man's chest, a hand in his hair again and one holding the small of his back. Poor Alexander. He was
smelled like icy hot and prune juice.
He smelled like powder and disappointment. Poor Alexander. So he was unsuspecting, innocent. Daniel couldn't let the man touch him this way when it aroused such terrible feelings in him. He tried to pull away, but the Baron held fast.
Oh gosh, that's me. Alexander, you're so kind and I don't want to spoil you.
He whimpered, feelings, tears rise up in his eyes. Daniel could hear the smooth breathing in Alexander's chest, and he tried...
That's my... He's like...
He tried to latch onto its rhythm to calm himself. Danny boy, what are you talking about? What do you mean, spoil me? He asked curiously, and the deep baritone of Alexander's voice vibrated against Daniel's cheek. Just the one.
So doesn't he?
He needed to admit it, needed to warn the man away from him, even if it meant that he would no longer help Daniel. He couldn't trick this man, dragging him down to hell with him.
Oh.
Go on, the Baron prodded gently, and Daniel let out a breath, gut clenched in fear.
I'm glad you get to read the last chapter.
He was going to say it, and he'd deserve anything he got.
You get to read the sinful chapter.
You get to read the worst one.
I'm not like you. I'm different from any normal man. I find pleasure in sinful enjoyment in ungodly things. He was shaken terribly by the time he'd finished, and to his surprise, Alexander had not let him go.
Oh, Danny boy.
The old man sighed. You call him old man here, and later you're gonna... Okay. And tilted the other's face upwards, looking him right in the eyes.
You don't have to worry about those things, not around me.
And before Danny knew it, Alexander's crusty lips were on his.
Crusty, nasty.
Soft, warm, chapped, strong. It was everything he'd come to know about the man. And fear in his stomach evaporated into confusion and shock. What? Was Nani? Alexander was kissing him, lips to lips, mouth to mouth. Yeah. A true bona fide kiss. He gasped, crusty, pushing Alexander away and stared at him, eyes wide and a flushed face. What are you doing? Daniel squealed in shock, touching a finger to his tingling lips.
I came to help you sleep, Danny boy.
And suddenly, Alexander seemed almost predatory. A dark gleam in his eyes.
As a little Catholic boy, you should be used to that.
You know what? That's true. You should be ready for this, Danny. Haven't you been through this 17 times already? Rarely seen. What? How could kissing him help him sleep? It was making his nerves worse. Oh Lord. Daniel had corrupted Alexander. His homosexual urges had tainted the poor Baron. His hands tightened and he jolted a little at... What? His hands tightened and he jolted a little at a sharp pain in his palms.
Danny boy, you're bleeding.
Alexander murmured, coming closer and taking the lad's hand in his.
The lad.
Turning the palm up.
Here, just relax. Let me make you feel good.
His tongue darted out smoothly, sliding across Daniel's palms and licking away the blood, as one does. Keeping his hawk's gaze on the man. Man, listen, if somebody licked my hand, the blood off my hand, and kept eye contact with me, I'd call the FBI.
I would call the police. They would not be allowed in my house any longer.
Breath caught in his throat. Danny doubted his face had ever been any redder than it was now. His chest fluttered in anticipation, and parts of him, dirty, awful parts, heated up in a mind-numbing way. Alexander! He choked, and the man chuckled, kissing his hands before leaning them towards the bed.
Don't worry.
He sounded so confident that Daniel had no choice but to let himself be led towards sin. Sitting down on the soft bed, the older man pulled Daniel into his lap, holding him at the hips now. But, Alexander, this isn't right. He was silenced with another kiss. Deeper than before.
Deeper.
The brunette nearly melted into the floor flesh, feeling a hot tongue probe into his mouth.
Ew.
Which he allowed, almost without thinking. One part of his brain... The God-fearing Christian devoted part was telling him he was going to hell. He was going to burn in fire and be tortured for his sins till the end of time. But the other part, the more human, carnal, sinful part, told him that this was his only chance. He would probably die soon anyways, and he should at least feel the fresh heat so late before the end. Alexander's hand on his rear, gently squeezing and kneading the flesh through his trousers. Totally convinced him it'd be worth. It'd be totally worth.
Flesh.
Get it softened up. You get to read the sins.
Alright. Oh, it's not that long. Okay, this is the last chapter. That was pretty short.
Enjoy.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. He gave a soft moan and moved his arms around Alexander's shoulders, the tongue in his mouth, the hands on his body. It was so perfectly what? Debauched? What?
Debauched?
Debauched?
I don't know.
Debauch? I don't know how to say that word. Djibouti?
Debootied.
It took his breath away completely. They parted lips, and Alexander took in Daniel's cherry red face and glazed eyes.
He's dead.
Ah, yes. How wonderfully this plan had worked. He doubted the man would disobey even the most demented of his commands now. A perfect, willing slave.
Nah.
You know, it's like the late 1800s. Can't you just buy those? Cut that out. Cut that out. I'm sorry. He gave a harsh squeeze to the lad's back. The lad. Can we not call him the lad?
That makes me think of like a 10-year-old.
I know. Backside and smirked at the twitch it caused between his legs.
Okay.
Leaning in, he licked and bit at his neck, hearing Daniel's breathing quicken. I can make you feel things you never dreamed. It's the LSD. He muttered against the soft flesh, and Daniel practically quivered with desire. But you have to say you'll let me. And another nip, pulling the brunette's shirt collar down to reach his collarbone. Daniel was lost in the feelings, not allowing himself to worry about anything else besides pleasure. If it meant hell, then so be it. He nodded.
Yes, Alexander, anything, please.
That deep laugh again, and his shirt was pulled from him as he was turned and pushed down onto the bed, his back pressing against the mattress. Okay. Alexander hovered over him, petting down his naked chest and leading his hand down, down.
Gotta get low. Got them apple bottom jeans. With the fur.
Stop. You want me to read the dirties or not?
I'm sorry, teacher.
He pulled the pants off Daniel's waist, causing the man to try and cover himself, but Alexander wouldn't let him, and pushed Daniel's hands away with his own. A lustful tilt to his lips.
I've never heard it.
Never heard it described quite like that. No. Hang on. I saw cum described as essence earlier. His essence. That was a new one.
Nice.
Continue.
Remember in Wolf's Rain when it was a tunnel?
Yeah.
What a time to be alive.
Oh god, I know. Go ahead.
Ah!
Daniel gasped sharply, hips jerking as the Baron grabbed him mercilessly and began to stroke up and down his stiff erection. I hate myself. He covered his mouth, eyes shut tightly as that hand moved on him, not doing much to stifle his noises. It was so ... so good. He could barely think, opening his legs a little more to the bear.
It's not gonna make a difference, but okay.
It's not gonna really do anything, buddy, but it's fine. Isn't it good, Danny boy? He felt
Jesus
breath on his neck again
Christ.
and moaned a little louder. He's feeling, isn't it worth it? Faster now, and Daniel whimpered, clutching the blanket beneath him. I can't stop.
Okay, I'm stuck in mucus forever.
Stuck in the mucus. Yes, it was so good, so worth it. He'd never felt anything so amazing. He felt so hot, sweat creating a fine sheen over his skin, and chest rising and falling with his gasps.
Oh, Alexander.
Ew.
I'm sorry.
Like
I'm sorry.
He whined, feeling himself come close to the edge. It was too soon. He didn't want this pleasure to end yet. Wanted to feel it, draw it out until it became almost painful. Alexander seemed to know what he was thinking, and bit harshly at his chest.
He was a vampire. He's killing him.
Go ahead, come. I want to see it. Ugh.
Look how they spelled it.
I know, they spelled it wrong. That's fine.
They're just a child.
It's the U one is dirty. That was all he needed, and he screamed.
Ah!
you accidentally say the wrong name. Wait!
Alexander was mad and crossed his arms and left. You said your ex's name, huh?
Okay.
I'm sorry for that segment, everybody.
He screamed, "Wait!" as he felt himself release, hot and thick, over the Baron's hand. His vision was white. Is that supposed to happen?
He's dying.
He's fine. It's just Jesus.
It's just Jesus shaking his finger at him.
No.
You stop that.
Pure ecstasy, and he felt the tremors of his glorious orgasm run through him for several minutes.
That's okay.
Dude, what's your secret?
It's Wade.
It's Wade Tibbs juice.
We're going to hell.
Several minutes, though.
Wow. That's a long time.
That's a long time.
I think actually he just passed out. He thought it was several minutes, and the Baron was like, "Yeah,
God, I think the record is like a minute and a half, Danny boy, and that's for a lady.
Pigs go for 30 minutes. Did you know that?
I did know that.
What's wrong with pigs?
What's wrong with pigs? Anyway.
Now that we got an animal fact out of the way. Animal facts with BubblegumPug.
The more you know. When he calmed down enough to open his eyes and steady his rapid breathing, he looked at Alexander's smug expression with a newly devout mind.
Wait, hang on. How do you measure how long a pig goes? What do you do, ask her?
I mean, like, if you want to get technical, it contracts. So you would just, like, stick something in there, probably.
Pig dildo.
Yeah. That's yeah.
Alright. That was somebody's job one day.
Are you satisfied with that explanation?
I'll take it.
Can I continue?
A science pig dildo.
Science pig dildo.
It's a good phrase.
Anyway.
Sorry, everybody.
If you decide to cut that out, can we have science pig dildo?
Absolutely.
This man was everything now. His savior, his friend, his protector, and lover.
Science pig dildo.
Science pig dildo.
Out of context, that's extremely strange.
That's extremely good. He hadn't shared anything like that with anyone in his life before. This was going to be a first in more ways than one, and that thought excited him. Alexander leaned down, kissing Daniel once more and moving himself closer to the lad, waist between the younger's legs. Daniel let him, closing his eyes and kissing back passionately.
Good God.
Danny boy. Alexander breathed over Daniel's lips and slipping away.
Nani?
And slipping a wet hand down between the Englishman's legs.
Moist.
Share yourself with me, Danny boy. And Daniel would. Oh, God. He would.
Hey, I originally wrote this for the kink meme, and I was surprised that I finished it in about a day. That I decided to post it. I felt as if my account could use a finished, better than mediocre quality story. Anyway, leave a review if you feel so inclined. Criticism will be appreciated. Flames will be ignored.
What was in this one?
It's my way of hugging people.
Oh.
Very edgy.
Rar means I love you in dinosaur.
If you ever say that again, I'll come to your house and murder you in your sleep.
Rar means I love you in dinosaur.
End
me. Do it.
And of course, minor torture.
I call reading the first half.
What?
I call the first half.
Call the first. That's not half. That's like a third. All right,
I believe that.
Whatever.
All right, this is driven to insanity by what is that sword
what is their
from
avatar?
I think that's the sword from Mario RPG in a dragon's head. I could be very wrong, but
I can't. Okay, whatever.
After the first warding ritual, I don't know what that means. Danny ensures the next one will go over better. Alex finds the new man's state of mind to be quite thrilling. Pre-story note. I have nothing to say about this. Warning, blood, sex, and of course murder, torture.
Of course.
The 12th of August, 1839. Danny had been spending the last 3 days in the choir.
You gonna read this first half?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Then you read the second half.
It's not a half. It's not fair. Krusty Krab unfair. Bubblegum
Mr.
is
Krabs
in there.
is in there. Blotting his oppression. Standing at the concession.
It's fine.
That's right.
It's fine. Go ahead.
The haziness no longer bothered him, and neither did the sobs, moans, and wails of the prisoners hanging in their cages. Hanging in their what now? He had a job to do, and he was going to make sure he did it right this time. We were just playing Amnesia. Where were the...
There weren't cages, per se.
I mean, not yet, at least. Are there later? I don't know.
Maybe. I don't remember.
He studied the tools and would mock what needed to be done every now and then. He was so entranced with what he was doing that Alexander himself had to fetch him away from the stifling rooms in order to eat. It was interesting, though, watching the younger man many times. When Alexander would enter the torture rooms, Daniel wouldn't. He didn't even notice. He'd be turning objects over gently in his hands, taking in every scratch and stain, feeling the weight and thinking. Or he'd be sliding a finger over a nail in the Iron Maiden, examining the point and closing the doors, seeing how the objects would slide past each other, imagining them piercing the flesh of a human. Alexander loves this, seeing how thorough the other was in his learning. Never had he imagined Daniel would take so well to the rituals that must be done in order to save him. Yeah, okay. On this particular day, when Alexander went to call the younger man to supper, he found himself running his hand over the horn of the brass bowl. The fire was not lit because that would be hot and his hand would burn, but the lid was shut tightly. Are you back with the base? Go back to the Kolachi parking lot. Where was that?
We're trying to read horrible things.
God, go away. Alexander had come to expect this sort of behavior by now, but what threw him off this time was that Daniel was whispering to himself. He'd never before spoken to himself. Are you sure? Because he goes crazy in the dark for like 3 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And the old man's curiosity piqued. He stepped further into the room, taking care not to alert Daniel to his presence.
Try and escape from this place, will ya? I'll show you just how we treat people like you. You killed her, didn't you, you little bitch?
I'm glad I didn't have to read that.
I had a lot of fun with that.
I don't like the B word. I don't like it.
I'm sorry.
Feels like it's not my place to use. I don't mind other people saying it, but I feel like it's not my place to use it.
I'm sorry.
You know.
But we say cunt freely.
I mean, I'll say like bitch in general, but I won't call people that because I feel like I'm not really a girl, so it's not really my place to claim the word bitch. But yeah, anyway, go ahead. Sorry for that interlude.
I give you permission.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks, he whispered sharply, his pupils narrowing as he laid his hand on the pipe protruding from the bull's mouth. Did you know your pupils would actually get bigger? Eh? When you're enjoying a thing and adrenaline, your pupils... Take that, author!
Science!
Science! Pig dildo! Something in Alexander felt strange. Perhaps it was because of how demented Daniel looked at that moment. He felt he should lay a hand on the younger man's shoulder to snap him out of it. However, the two were not exactly in the practice of touching one another. And an explanation was not high on Alexander's list of things to do at ATM. It's your line.
Danny boy?
Alexander spoke up, causing the younger to jump and turn to face the elderly man. Any signs of abnormality gone from his face? His face?
Come, it is time we dine.
I thought it said it's time we die, he said. The older man gestured for Daniel to go ahead of him, which he did. In passing, Daniel looked into the man's eyes, his own showing he was wondering how long the man had been standing there. Alexander did not give him an answer, and merely closed the door behind him as he followed. Alexander, when's the next warden ritual to be performed? Daniel asked. They were making their way upstairs.
Soon, Danny boy.
I will not fail like the last time.
I know you won't, Danny boy.
It's your half.
Boy. 15th of August, 1839. When was the first one? The 12th. Oh, boy. Oh,
what happened on
days.
the 13th and 14th?
I don't... Nothing.
It's almost my birthday!
Oh, boy.
This
is your present.
Yay!
Yay! The blood wards are failing. The shadow beckons, and its cry disarms my action. Hurry, no time to spare. You have to kill another. A man, or what used to be a man, but was now barely more than flesh and bones, was strapped to the table. He had a cloth tied over his head so that he could not see, and another in his mouth, and tied in order to gag him. He struggled what little he could, whining and crying out as best he could from around the cloth. Alexander produced a knife and laid it upon the table beside where Daniel stood. Daniel understood and took the knife into his own hand, examining the blade. He looked down at the man on the table and fear washed over his face. Alexander was afraid of this. Despite Daniel's preparations, he still was not used to the actual taking of another's life.
Oh, it's me.
Yep.
Do it. Save yourself. He's a murderer, Daniel. He's evil. Cold-blood killer. Hurry.
Hurry!
Hurry, Daniel.
Hurry, Daniel! Daniel thought, attempting to egg.
I like eggs.
Egg himself onward. That doesn't... I know that's the right word. It doesn't feel like the right word, though.
It really doesn't.
Egg.
Eggs.
He had done this once before. Why was he having so much trouble this time? Suddenly he became aware that Alexander was still in the room and that he was watching intently. Daniel laid his hands on the table and hung his head.
Oh, Alexander, you must let me be. I have to concentrate. I was eating a sweet tart.
He said in a demanding tone. Saddened, Alexander did as he wished and left the room. He did not go far, however. He closed the door and took a few steps down the hall toward the choir, but stopped short as he heard a voice, Daniel's voice. He could not make out the words for... What?
For the man.
For the man was... The man... When you say the man, I don't know you're talking about Daniel. I thought he was talking about, like, the prisoner.
The police.
The police were whispering.
I told you it was them, Jeremy.
Assuming it was Daniel attempting to talk himself into doing what needed to be done, Alexander resumed his walk.
Cut the flesh. Watch the blood spill. Let it come.
Alexander jerked his hand from the handle of the door and swiftly turned around. He retraced his steps in only 3 rapid strides and pulled the door open. The man on the table was writhing in pain. Fluorescent green paint had been drawn across his chest and stomach, just as Alexander...
It's 1839. Where did you get that?
You know, just a little radioactive. Just as Alexander had taught Daniel to do. Blood trickled down from an open cut. Oh yeah, tickled. Blood tickled down from an open cut that was progressively getting larger as Daniel guided the knife across the painted flesh.
Please, I didn't do anything.
Daniel spoke in a mocking manner, his eyes becoming wild once more.
Paint the man, cut the lines, paint the man, cut the lines.
He shouted, tearing through the last expanse of skin that needed to be... That's a sentence.
Who's talking? Am I talking?
That's Dan.
Please, the man cries.
Daniel grinned, looking down at what he could see of the man's face. His own breathing had become heavy.
What,
and he
his nose? If he got his eyes covered and his mouth covered, what's left?
He just stared deep into his nostrils. And he didn't seem to care when he cut his own hand, setting the knife back down upon the table. He laid his left... What?
How did he cut his hand when he set it down?
I don't know.
Maybe
he's an idiot.
It's just me.
He laid his left palm upon the man's stomach and stroked his head with the other, effectively wiping his own blood upon him, although that did not appear to be Daniel's intent.
Hush, hush, now you sleep.
No,
He whispered
no screams now, only dreams.
He whispered to the man, almost singing as if it were a lullaby. Slowly the man stopped breathing and the blood drained from his body. Still, Daniel had not moved from that position. Alexander, who had witnessed this scene, began to fidget uncomfortably, because that was cray.
It's like, where'd you get that future paint?
Something was not right with what he had just seen. Or was something not right with, not right what?
Not right
What?
how he'd taken it.
Whom?
Whomst.
Fighting the awkward atmosphere, he took a step into the room and laid a hand upon Daniel's shoulder.
I did well.
Daniel spoke, his voice far louder than it needed to
I'm
be.
sorry. I did well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alexander leaned down, peering into his eyes. His own eyes widened. He had never seen someone so detached from reality.
One life or another.
Daniel shouted again, his voice shaking.
You hear me, Guardian of the Orb? I did all this for you. Now once more, withdraw your shadow from my domain.
Danny boy, Alexander spoke sharply, snapping Daniel from his trance. I gotta like mucus in my... Yeah. It is done. Come, there's much to do with the prisoners. The shadow may be warded for now, but we must not rest from our other duties. Daniel raised his head, looking at the wall in front of him. He removed his hands from the dead man and let them hang at his sides. For a moment, Alexander thought the younger man was going to break again and cry, as he had done only a few nights ago in the guest room. Alexander was generally a patient man, but at that moment he was in no condition to console a weeping, cursed man.
Cursed.
Stop using the word man.
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 Amen.
It came as a shock when Daniel spun around, wrapping his arms around the... Oh.
He's possessed by a gay demon.
Me too.
Me too.
Wrapping his arms about the older man's neck and drew him into a kiss. Alexander's eyes widened. He was staring into Daniel's once more. He had thought he had snapped the young man out of it, but his eyes told another story. He was much more far gone. Much
more far gone.
Is that... Are you sure that's how you want to word that there, buddy pal?
I am an English major. I can tell you that's real good. That's not true at all.
That's fine. That's fine. He was much more far gone than he had thought.
Good sentence. It's like I wrote it. I did well.
Daniel repeated, leaning back onto the table, bringing Alexander down with him. Alexander had to prop himself up with his hands on either side of Daniel's head. He wasn't sure what the younger was trying to do, or at least he wasn't sure if the other really knew what he was doing.
Wait, next to the dead man? Are they just on top of the dead man right now?
I like to think that they are, yeah. Oh god, somebody stop messaging me on Discord while I'm doing this, please. I love you, but don't... Stop it.
Not now, honey.
Not now, sweetie. Daniel sensed the older man... Stop. Hesitation. And drew him in again for yet another kiss, pulling him down so that their bodies touched.
Everything time we touched... I'm sorry. I'm so energetic tonight. It's all these sweet tarts. And every time we kiss, I feel like it's flying.
Did you consider that maybe the Benadryl's not making you tired because you're just beating the shit out of it with a pound of sugar?
Because I've eaten this grab and share size sweet tarts throughout the day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything inside Alexander told him he should pull away, leave the room, and move on to the duties that were still to be done that day. But Daniel rolled But Daniel rolled his hips up into Alexander's, and Alexander groaned. Oh my god.
Oh, are they gonna bang on top of a corpse?
That's my headcanon for this story. I don't know if that was intentional, but that's definitely what's happening, in my mind's eye.
Wow.
Okay, it had been far too long since Alexander had seen his love, and it finally struck him why he felt strange when he saw the way Daniel had been behaving. He was horny as hell.
Who? Which one?
I don't know. I don't know. Daniel continued to roll his hips against Alexander as his tongue found its way.
Oh, it just found its way in there.
Found its way. The older man's mouth is a nasty 1800s teeth.
His teeth are dentures, and he dislodged one of them.
Oh,
it
God.
Was lips clacking around in there.
Oh. Alexander gave up on resisting and eagerly proceeded to explore Daniel's mouth with his own tongue. You can't. At the same time,
They're battling.
They're battling for dominance. The two remained locked that way for several moments. Their tongues Oh.
Ew.
Oh. God. Their tongues dancing and saliva trickling from the corners of their mouths. I wish you could see me grimacing.
Ooh, I'm too.
their hips and groins pressed together, and their panting and moans starting to fill the room, and the prisoners could like hear them, and it was ugh.
They were like, "Are they doing this again?" Please.
Oh, okay. One of the things still bothered Alexander, though, and he removed a hand from the table in an attempt to fix
I
this
knew
problem.
it! I knew the dead man was still there.
His hand barely made it to the bindings. The dead man was still in when Daniel bit his tongue just sharp enough to cause pain.
Forget him.
He hissed, grinding his hips against Alexander again.
Don't worry about the dead guy. We got bang, man. It's been my fantasy. Necrophilia.
Oh, hey, take a drink. Whiskey.
That sounds like a water bottle.
No, that's where I keep my whiskey.
I take it to school. They never know.
That was all Alexander needed to know. He attacked. He attacked Daniel's mouth with kisses, each getting feistier and
fetishier.
I mean, that too. And sloppier, and Daniel responded in kind by picking up the pace of his hips.
Are they just dry humping each other?
Yeah.
Oh.
Alexander ran his fingers through Daniel's hair, straining themselves with Oh, okay. Staining, that makes more sense. Staining him the blood of the man, the two were... Oh.
Nice!
And Daniel further dirtied him by painting his white hair with what blood was left on his hands.
Ew.
Mixture of a dead man's and Daniel's. Alexander liked that for some reason.
You know. And then they were like, wait a minute. We killed a man and he peed and pooped right here and now.
I mean, that's true. That's what happens when he dies. Yeah. He evacuates. must smell like roses.
There.
Alexander decided it was time to rid them of their pants.
Nice.
I mean, that's, you come home from work and you're like, it's time to rid myself of my pants.
Every day.
Every day. And upon touching the waistband of Daniel's, found himself flipped over onto his back, just on a dead guy.
He was
with
still
the younger
warm.
Now on top of him. Daniel placed a finger over the other man's lips to silence him before kissing him once more. The younger then picked up where Alexander had been forced to leave off and removed both his own trousers and Alexander's. Daniel didn't particularly care for the look of the...
Wait. How stupid would he look with his, British Revolution coat and no pants?
No pants, just like his nasty old ball sack. Dangling off the table.
Good imagery!
Daniel didn't particularly care for the look of the older man's body, as he should not. So he did no more with his clothing. His own, you nasty old man nipples.
They sag down to your belly button. I can't.
God. His own, however, were removed in record time.
You're gonna ruin your good coat.
Alexander smirked as he watched. As more and more of Daniel's skin was exposed for him, his own eyes becoming wild.
God.
As Daniel leaned back up to continue the task at hand, he once more found himself on his back beneath Alexander. Man, they're just flopping all over that dead guy.
Keeps squishing. It's making those pig noises from the game.
Oh,
Oh. Real bad.
He glared at the older man, to which Alexander told him, "You're already so bloodied up, it is easier to clean one person than it is two." And the issue was pursued no more. Alexander's hand disappeared behind Daniel.
Keep going.
And the younger wins as he was invaded.
Like Poland.
For a moment, Alexander feared that Daniel would really snap out of this and that he would be rejected, and that would be really
awkward.
Yeah.
I was just doing the prostate exam, I swear.
Relief washed over him as Daniel instead thrust himself as far down onto Alexander's fingers as he could and just snapped them.
His old bony fingers turned to dust up there.
God, desiccated.
Sorry for these sentences that are leaving my mouth, Jesus. Is that all, Alex? After all you've done to those men, you can't bring yourself to harm me?
Daniel taunted. Because you were so able to do that on your own, Danny boy. Dan. Alexander replied, growling as Daniel
Go on. Continue.
Growling as Daniel greedily rode his fingers.
Wow.
Wow.
That's one for the record books.
I don't like it.
Awful.
Daniel kissed Alexander once more. Wow, like every time they say that, I can like feel it, and it makes me feel nasty.
I feel you.
Which was quite eagerly returned as the fingers were removed. Neither skipped a beat, and as Daniel thrust back down, Alexander... Whoa! They're like on the same wavelength.
Wow, hive mind.
Alexander entered his butthole, causing... Why can't they ever just say ass?
Yes.
Like,
I don't know.
Can't say the booty.
The booty.
Causing the younger to moan. Foreplay be damned, they both wanted this far too much. Can't have Danny boy, like, waking up from his weird death trance. Oh, God! The air became stifling and heavy with their pants. I know
I imagine their pants, like, hovering around. Haunted.
Like that Jimmy Neutron episode. Daniel's bones and Alexander's their pants. Really?
Nice.
Their heavy breathing. Could you say that instead? Their pants. Daniel may have thought over and practiced well when it came to efficiently torturing the prisoners, but his inexperience showed when it came to this. What an asshole.
Man.
He fumbled with everything, not sure what he was supposed to do exactly. Alexander sped up his thruster, moving from... Ew,
don't do that.
Daniel's swollen. Don't use the word swollen.
Why do the authors keep wording it like this? Like,
swollen,
I don't think that happens.
I mean, if you just really beat the shit out of him, maybe. But can you not use the word swollen in your smut? It brings to mind like a nasty...
bee sting.
Yeah, gross. Swollen lips. Ugh. To his jaw and down to his throat. He wondered if Daniel would talk to himself again. He wanted to hear it. He would. But Daniel hardly seemed capable of coherent thought, let alone speech. Slightly disappointed, Alexander chose to listen to the sounds he made with each thrust as the two drew closer to their climax.
Nice.
It didn't take much before Daniel reached his limit. Seed.
Oh, there it is.
Seed.
Oh, the next part of the sentence is bad.
I know. Oh yeah, there's the essence. That's what I saw earlier.
Wow.
Oh, awesome. Seed. Spilling all over himself, mixing with the blood he was now soaked in. Alexander grunted again and followed sweet. His own essence.
Good God.
Filling Daniel to the essence. I mean, points for originality. I've literally never heard it called essence before.
Nice.
Daniel roughly grabbed Alexander's hair and brought him in to kiss once more as the older man pulled out from him. Alexander removed himself from Daniel and clothed himself once more. The younger man still lay sprawled upon the corpse that was growing cold.
Why did this happen?
Why? Who thought this was a good idea?
The depraved author.
He was still panting heavily and watched Alexander's every movement. He thought he saw disgust in the old man's face, and once more thought that his inexperience had messed things up.
Alexander, there isn't much time,
he said softly, lowering his gaze from the white-haired man.
I can feel it. We must act swiftly.
He glanced at the dead man from the corner of his eye.
I'll do whatever it takes.
Alexander studied the younger man's face. Daniel's expression was not that of a sane man's. It had not been for many days, but now it was not just his eyes, but the rest of him. His dick looked mad weird.
Yeah, it was strange, man.
He looked tired. Alexander made to leave the room, but Daniel spoke again.
I will not fail like last time.
Alexander smirked. Daniel may be out of his mind, but he was such an obedient man, such a quick learner. Alexander liked that about him. I know you won't, Danny boy.
Nothing to see here. Move along.
Sweat droop.
I'm
sorry I wrote this weird necrophilia thing.
I'm sorry.
Forgive me, Jesus, for I have sinned.
There is no forgiveness.
There is no God. Only Redawilo.